Welcome to the AirCon Vault. Recordings of the live streams from AirWiggle's audio conference. These are made free thanks to our sponsors: A Sound Effect, Game Audio Learning, Kilohertz, Audio Kinetic, Soundcuts, Sugi, Boom Library, Sound Warriors, and AirWiggles, the online home for audio people.
Welcome to our talk. So you got a job, now what? This is... Basically, there are so many resources out there for getting into game audio, but there aren't as many for once you actually get your foot in the door and start doing this as like a full-time thing. And partly because it's so easy to provide the advice to anybody starting out, and the generalizations can be made that are still going to be helpful, but it becomes more difficult as the situations get more nuanced, and the work differs from like one employer to the next and stuff like that. So it's harder to really quantify and then condense everything into like useful information after that fact. So we're hoping to break that trend and share some information that we feel helped us along the way in our personal career journeys, and maybe help you find out what you need to do now that you've landed your job too. So the agenda for today, we're going to introduce ourselves so you know who we are. We're going to go through the dev cycle a little bit, but not much. Then we're going to go into the work after that and the common challenges and solutions that you might see in there, your career and how to navigate it, including some sort of like basic terms and basic structure and stuff like that. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Big old disclaimer. One, we don't have all the answers. It's super subjective and nuanced. It's hard to put everything into one talk. And on top of that, we are both coming from a AAA North America standpoint. So some of these things will be relevant to everybody. Some of these things might not. This is just our experience with it. Hopefully it helps you regardless of where you're from and regardless of what part of the industry you're going into. But just keep in mind that this is where we're coming from. And so who this talk is for, probably mainly for AAA aspiring folks, just because of where we're coming from with it, but anybody should be able to get something out of it anyway. So we hope you have a good time regardless. Just keep in mind that where we come from is a kind of specific place in North America and AAA. So, Paul, who are you?
Hey, everybody. So my name is Paul Boechler, and I'm a senior sound designer currently at EA, working on the next iteration of the Skate franchise. But I come from a long background. I've been doing audio professionally for about 17 years at this point. Cut my teeth on the FIFA games for a while, a little bit of Time and Need for Speed, and I also have a background in music production and teaching in post-secondary. So that's kind of where I come from. And yes, my last name is a little bit weird, but I take no offense to any mispronunciation. Presley, who are you?
Hello, I'm Presley. My name is almost more normal, I guess. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now. I started out at BioWare as a junior audio artist, was my first gig after graduating from VFS in Vancouver. Since then, I've worked on a number of projects, including God of War Ragnarok, Anthem, Dragon Age, a bunch of things like that. And I'm currently a senior sound designer at Gearbox. So, very quickly, before we get into the workflow and the career and everything else, we just wanted to do a quick little run through of just the dev cycle in general. And again, disclaimer, this could change depending on where you are and what kind of team you're on, but we'll try to give the general notes of what's going on here. So, very briefly, first up is pre-production. This is where your large-scale technical decision-making is happening. This is where you're prototyping, you're creating your your creative targets, you're sort of brainstorming what you're going to need to complete the game. This is like all your estimations, everything else going on, your scope cuts, everything else that could come with that. Generally speaking, pre-production ends with, you'll see terms like the beautiful corner, the vertical slice, basically a small little snippet of what the team envisions will be the final product of the game, just in a very, very small scale. So they can give that to producers, to investors, and all that kind of stuff. Once that gets passed, you move into production. This is the largest part of the content creation part of the game. All of your stuff is coming in as change requests for things that are going into it, and all that kind of stuff. Usually production ends with alpha. Could be a little bit different depending on where you are. But after alpha, you go into finaling. This is where you're doing your bug fixing, your final mixes, the certifications and stuff like that. This is a hopefully where everything kind of comes together in a neat little box. This could also be like optimization time and stuff like that, especially if you're working on console. After that, that should end hopefully with a shipped game. And this is where paths kind of divide depending on what kind of game you are working on. So if it's a live service game, you're probably going into content updates and stuff like that. If it's just sort of a general post-launch, there might be some bug fixing and stuff like that, but really you're likely gearing up for the next project or DLC or whatever is coming next. In terms of audio team and how we fit into that, we have in pre-production, usually it's a really small team, typically seniors and leads, to sort of like get the ball rolling and get things started. This is where you do most of your experimentation, all the iteration stuff. You're estimating, you're seeing what you need for outsourcers, all that kind of stuff. And then moving into production is where your team actually scales up. You get mostly the full workload of people that you'll need. And this is where you do most of your audio work. After that, we have into finaling. There's a chance you might add some temporary help to sort of get things over to the finish line and make sure that everything is nice and neatly packaged and ready to go. Hopefully, this is also the time where you go pencils down on asset creation. And it's a lot of bug fixing or just like minor content tweaks and that kind of thing. This is also between production and finaling, you'll also see things like localization for dialogue and that kind of thing. And then after all that, you get your post-launch and live service, which, like I said, could differ depending on what type of game you're making. Live service is going to look different than a standalone game. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Paul to start talking about the work.
All right, so that's a little bit of like super high level look, just really to get everybody on the same page, because we know that, especially getting into AAA game development, sometimes even just that like cycle might not be something that everybody is like inherently aware of. And Jamie, yeah, it's a totally valid question, and I'm not trying to be glib with that response of how long does each of those phases take in AAA. Unfortunately, there's no way to know. You might be on a 1 year like annualized kind of title, you might be on a 2 year, you might be on something way longer. So again, it does very much depend, but you will likely see it broken up into those chunks. So talking about the work now a little bit more. So really, I kind of wanted to break this down into some ways that will give people a little bit more, kind of explain some of the challenges that happen with the work itself, and really getting into some possible solutions on how to overcome that. And just as a brief disclaimer, I do have to jump here in an hour. I am very much still working, so I apologize in advance. This is very much like drinking from the fire hose for this information, but we're going to try and get through it. So anyways, for folks that are probably trying to currently get a job, or maybe folks have this experience from their own times trying to look for work, it's very challenging. It's incredibly challenging right now trying to get a job, because you're dealing with all these things of like, I have to learn Unreal and Unity and Wise and Fmod and Pro Tools and Reaper, and there's a million plugins, and should I learn programming, and what about networking and making a demo? There's a ton of things that go into getting a job, and it's very difficult. So then when you actually get a job, suddenly it becomes all stand-ups and meetings and Slack and Miro and Zoom and everything like that. So in theory, this should be way easier. And a lot of times it is, obviously, compared to some of the challenges that you have to go through when it comes to finding that work. But then after you do that work for a little while, sometimes you realize, oh man, this is actually so much harder, but for all of these reasons that I wasn't actually trained or educated on, and I have no idea how to deal with any of these things. So really, the fact that these are very, very common challenges for a lot of us, that's really what this talk is about, in trying to actually quantify some of these things, and not just define the problem space, but actually give you some suggestions on ways to work through this. So that's really what we're going to be talking about with the work. If we jump to the next slide there, Presley. So imposter syndrome, this general feeling that you don't belong here, talking about time management, of feeling like you're not getting enough done, low quality sounds or concern that you're not doing good work, organization, and generally like not knowing what you need to be doing or not knowing where your stuff is, knowledge gaps that could be related to Unreal or programming or any other kind of technical challenges. communication things, whether that's not knowing who to speak to or how to ask for the things that you need to do your jobs, or just navigating office politics, and then creative challenges along with that. Maybe you're working in an area that you've never worked in before, or maybe you find yourself doing the same thing over and over again. So those are the main kind of things we want to talk about in this section. So once again, big old disclaimer on this section. The reason for this is, again, I didn't want to just define these problems and then leave it alone. But that being said, just because we're going to talk about some solutions here does not mean that these will work for everybody. Your mileage will absolutely vary. And also know that we are flying pretty close to some much larger issues here related to anxiety, depression. So at the end of the day, you know you the best, and the potential solution for any of these could be ask for help. And sometimes that is going to be the best thing. So please understand that we are not making absolute claims as medical experts here. We are simply talking to this as experienced end users of these challenges, and therefore you should always do what you think is best in your own given situation. But understanding the difference of when you need to try a new productivity technique like the Pomodoro or body doubling, and when you should actually go seek medical help is a very important distinction. So again, just know that we are not making big claims here that will work for everybody. But with that in mind, let's get into the first one. So we're talking about imposter syndrome. Are there in-house therapists at these big AAA studios? No, there are not. That said, most AAA companies will provide you free like work coaching and other kind of resources to improve mental health. So you may have access to those things. Please keep in mind your manager is not your therapist, which is sometimes a thing that people will do, but that's a whole separate thing. So anyways, imposter syndrome. Generally, this is seen as an inability to accept or internalize praise and accomplishments. And what that manifests itself as is that in turn can make you feel like a phony or a fraud. And that just sort of increases stress and anxiety around a lot of things. A lot of people deal with this, especially I think related to the fact that there's no particular one way to get into game audio. And because of that, people tend to feel like whichever way they made it in was somehow like a fluke or maybe not entirely valid. Like maybe you had a personal connection, or maybe you did some other games, but you know, you don't really feel like you contributed that much to them or anything like that. Whatever this is, on top of that too, there's also technical things like maybe you're not working in the latest game engine or you don't know whys, and then suddenly you don't feel like you belong in game audio because everybody's talking about cool wise things or Reaper things, and you don't have that experience. Whatever it may be, try and break it down right away and understand if it's broad feelings or if it's specific feelings. Do you not feel like, or do you feel like an imposter because you don't know how to make sounds, or is it because you're doing something new for the first time? And I think understanding and gaining some perspective on that can really help kind of break the problem down and make it a much more manageable thing to realize. And the other thing too, I got this great advice from a work coach, which was used fact-based evidence to reframe your thoughts. Is anyone actually telling you that you're doing a bad job? Are you underperforming by any tangible metric? And if the answer to that is no, it's likely that you're doing something for the first time, or you're in kind of uncharted waters and your brain is sort of playing tricks on you. The other thing there to understand is you don't need to feel confident in order to act confident. And I generally don't like that kind of like fake it till you make it sort of advice. It does absolutely work in a lot of situations, but I don't think it's a long-term thing. But I think it's worth understanding that even experienced people don't always feel super confident when we are doing things. And sometimes you have to just sort of deal with it and try and act as confidently as you can. And then over time, that will get better. The biggest thing to understand with imposter syndrome is understand that you are in control. It is a problem that is created by your brain, and your brain is also the solution to it. If you need more reading materials on that Secret Thoughts of Successful Women is a fantastic book. It does say them in there. It's not gender specific, but Valerie Young has an also fantastic TED Talk. By the way, for any of this stuff, I'm going to be dropping a lot of like books into the references. I have like a one sheet page for all of these things, so you don't have to worry about taking notes for this stuff. I'll send that out afterwards, and you don't need to wait for the recording. That's imposter syndrome. Moving on to the next one now. Time management, this general feeling like you are not getting enough done in the day. This, I find, can manifest itself in a whole bunch of different ways. Regardless of what it is, though, I think the biggest thing is tracking your tasks and measuring your time can really reveal what the worst offenders are here. Are you taking too much time to get set up? Are you taking too much time to get things implemented in game? Whatever that may be, if you go through that process of tracking your time, you're likely going to see what's eating your time, and that's going to really help you identify that. And having measurable targets, that's huge, because if you're not feeling like you're getting enough done, what are you actually supposed to be getting done? I think generally people that come from creative backgrounds kind of know, like, our days are not always the same, but if we're measuring ourselves against our most productive day ever, well, most days are not going to be that, and therefore you're going to be stuck in this kind of like, oh, I didn't feel like I got enough done. And the other thing with that too is adapt to working with less time, especially if you are coming from, like, if this is kind of your first job, you may have had days, weeks, or months to perfect your portfolio, and now suddenly you have to create some quality sounds in only a couple of hours as you bounce between meetings. And that kind of like pendulum swing and context shifting is something that does take time to get used to. So measure your time, or track your time and your tasks, have measurable targets for your tasks, getting used to working with that time, and then prioritize them. It doesn't mean you need to prioritize every single thing in your day, but simply identifying what your highest priority stuff to get done is. So when I start my day, I always kind of think like, what is the one thing that if everything else didn't get done, what is the one thing I need to get done today? And that's what I focus on. So at least that way, you know, you're working on the high priority stuff. Keep in mind with priorities, the newest problem is not the highest priority problem. Sometimes when somebody pings you or something comes up, we have a tendency to go chase that because it's new and exciting, but it doesn't mean that it's the highest priority. Sometimes it just needs to be acknowledged and prioritized accordingly, and then you can get to it in due time. When it comes to distractions, there's a whole number of ways to do this or deal with this. Distractions can generally come from two places. They can be work and non-work related. So work related is like being constantly pinged on Slack, having emails, having meetings, having people coming by your desk or your office, whatever that may be. It's work things getting in the way of work things. And the non-related things might be your phone, might be Discord, might be anything else that is non-work related. So for distractions, I generally find just make it difficult for yourself. And that might be something as simple as like, oh, I'm getting distracted by Instagram. Okay, well, uninstall the app. You don't need to abandon your whole account, but make it so you have to go through the web browser on your phone to get there. And suddenly you'll realize, oh, this is actually much harder, and you're more aware when you actually go to that distraction. Or just put your phone in the back of your room. You can go to it as much as you want, but actually having to go through the act of getting up and getting your phone will start to kind of snap you out of that like habitual state, and it can really help. And with work-related ones, don't discount just actually booking time to do your work. I had to do that today because my day got filled up with meetings. So I actually had to book a time slot of like, no, I need to do my job. And that can feel really weird, but sometimes that needs to happen as well. For motivation, there's a whole bunch of different ways, and this might change for everybody. You could do things like Pomodoro, where you set a timer to work for 25 minutes, and then you have a forced 5-minute break. You could do things like body doubling, where you maybe hop in a Zoom call or a Slack huddle with coworkers. You don't even need to speak, but just that act of somebody else being present can sometimes sort of keep us focused on the task. And other times it's nice to like plan big days to just really get a bunch done that you're sort of in control of, as opposed to having crunch forced upon you. Whatever it might be, building up momentum is going to be a really important thing, and we'll talk more about that later. But anything that you can do to help time management is super helpful. Moving on to the next one, we are talking about organization. So this is kind of that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be working on or where to start. I find this can really manifest itself as like spinning your tires, where it's like you start your workday and you just don't know where to start. Starting on one thing feels like you're neglecting 4 other things, and it's a really bad state to be in. So what I find with this is, again, prioritizing your tasks and just identify that one and that high priority one. It's almost like when you separate prioritization as its own task, it's easier to just evaluate your tasks separately, and that makes it easier, and you can have more confidence to know which one to start on. And then work backwards is something that I find is really important. I think when it comes to certain creative things, we tend to want to start very like rough, where it's like, oh, I have to make a sound. Well, I'm going to go start digging in a sound library and go find some sounds and put some stuff in my DAW and start creating sounds, or I'll open up a synth, whatever that may be. I find those sometimes that can be really difficult because you're starting in such a vague and ambiguous kind of state. It's difficult to make that momentum. Whereas sometimes working backwards with a particular task might be an easier way to break it down into bite-sized and manageable steps. Oh, Presley's coming back here. Presley, I just want to make sure we didn't lose the...
Hi, I don't know what happened there. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure we didn't lose the presentation deck on screen. I also have a dog who's now like squarely sleeping in front of my feet now.
I'm so sorry about that. Like my thing just kind of went wonky for a hot second.
That's okay. I'm going to keep talking about working backwards.
Yeah, go. I'll get this back up. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So basically, yeah, if you have that dreaded blank canvas and you don't know what to do, I find working backwards. How am I supposed to deliver this particular feature or this particular sound? Is it going to be in-game, or is it going to be a capture that maybe I send to my lead to review or something like that? If it's in-game, okay, well then, like, how... what's the playback method in game? Is it one shots? Is it looping? Like what buckets do I need to fill up with sounds? And then basically, as you kind of work backwards, it becomes easier to suddenly have a list of the things that you need to do. And that can make it much easier to start and kind of get over that, that blank canvas kind of state. Other than that, if you create the tasks for yourself in your day-to-day, write better task descriptions for yourself. If you have tasks written for you, ask for better descriptions. And what I mean by that is actually stating clear deliverables, clear sign-off, and clear targets. It might seem really easy when you're doing task work that you'll be like, oh, I'll remember what I meant when I come to delivering this. But oftentimes you'll end up with tasks that just say like, do the thing. You're like, I have no idea what this is. So write better task descriptions for yourself so you understand what you need to deliver, and that's going to help make everything clear overall. And do the prep work of organizing your tools. This comes to more like technical organization, or this concept of mise en place for anybody that knows that from cooking. But if a chef is making a dish, they don't like read through the list of ingredients and go, oh, it calls for an onion, and then they start chopping an onion. They look through the list of ingredients and they prep what they need before they start cooking. Same kind of thing for audio. If you haven't done any prep work and organization in a while, you probably have sounds scattered all over your computer. You probably have plugins in various states of working and not working. Hell, most of us probably can't even remember half the plugins we have anymore. So actually taking some time, and this can be work time. This is organization. This doesn't need to be in the margins of work after hours, but actually taking time to prep your setup, get it organized, make track templates, make session templates. All of that stuff is going to help you kind of build that momentum and make it easier to do your work. And also don't sleep on doing warm-ups. I know Ross mentioned this in his talk on Monday a little bit about like sketching and using phase plant and just kind of recording that output. You know, start your day with 10 to 15 minutes of just making noise, not with the intention of saving it, but basically just simply like get in the habit of like making some noise, and it's going to be much easier to transition into making work. So anyways, do some warm up. It may help you. And then start a to-do list. This has honestly been like an absolute game changer for me. I use a tool called Obsidian for this. You can use whatever you want, but basically literally everything in my day goes in my to-do list. That might be a meeting. That might've been something that just randomly came up. Whatever it is, it goes in the to-do list, and it helps me kind of keep track of my time throughout the day and know what I'm working on. So if you want to know what I worked on yesterday, I have a list above me that tells me exactly what I worked on yesterday. If you want to know what I worked on 3 weeks ago, I can do that. And I find that that gets you out of this state of not knowing what you're working on or supposed to be working on, because you have this sort of record keeping. And by doing it every week, I find if I like, you know, if I slack on this list for like a week or whatever, the whole system doesn't go out of whack. I can pick it up again in the future. And the last thing, if you're showing up to work and you're just feeling like completely like, I don't know what I should be working on and everything feels bad, chances are you just need to get some more sleep as well. Don't discount that That can happen obviously in multiple things, like whether you just had a bad night's sleep or you have, signs of burnout, whatever it may be. Get some sleep, and chances are that's going to be much easier to understand the work that's in front of you. Low quality sounds. I think this is probably what most people are afraid of when they, join a new project or a new team or a new company. Understand that this is part of what your demo reel was for. So trust that the people around you have already evaluated your ability to make sounds, and they trust you. So I understand that's much easier said than kind of internalized. But again, this is what part of your demo reel was for. So chances are your sounds are probably not that bad. Avoid perfectionism and try to fail fast. What we mean by this is when it comes to making sounds, get them in game as soon as possible. Don't be sacred that your first attempt is going to be perfect right away, but get it in game. There are certain sounds in certain situations where you can't evaluate your sounds until you get them in game and you understand the cadence, the rhythm, and the frequency at which those sounds are going to occur in game. So getting things in game as soon as possible is really going to help you understand how your sounds are playing back and help you make better sounds. And along with that, ask for feedback early. Obviously, there's a right way and a right frequency with which to ask for feedback that you're still kind of taking ownership for your work, but getting fresh perspectives can really help give you confidence to know that your sounds probably aren't that bad. And along with getting sounds in game is context is going to make it easier to identify quality. So don't hyper-analyze your sounds in isolation, whether that's in your DAW or in a test level. You're likely going to end up making sounds that are too big, too loud, and they're probably going to need to be redone anyways. So just try to get things in and evaluate in context if you can, and work from coarse to fine, just like this absolutely wonderful image of how to draw an owl. First you draw 2 circles and then you draw the rest of the owl, but work from coarse to fine. We're not going to start with our sounds, or like sculpting in a way. You're not going to put a block of clay down there and then start working on eyelashes or something like that. You're going to roughly kind of get something shaped in, and you can treat your sounds like that in the same way, but it becomes easier to know proportions and where your sounds are going to fit when you evaluate in context. So chances are your sounds are not that bad, but getting it in game as soon as possible is really going to help you understand that. Okay, that was a lot of me talking. So we have a puppy intermission, so I can drink some coffee here real quick. That, by the way, is the dog that is sleeping at my feet and forcing me to like stand awkward right now. Thank you again for all the comments and everything in chat. Let's keep going. So, technology gaps. So this, I think, is another one that people kind of, I don't want to say like over prioritize here, mainly like, it can be very valid, but the main thing with this is there's a lot of resources when it comes to getting over technical challenges. So this one is easier in the grand scheme of things because you have so many options. But I think it manifests itself for a lot of people, and it might seem like a larger priority. Like if you show up to a game team that is using Unreal and you've never used Unreal, that's going to seem like a very big knowledge gap. But there are no shortage of resources, from like built-in Epic and Unreal learning resources, from YouTube tutorials, from Udemy, from other resources you may have at your work, whatever that may be. There's a lot of ways to get over this, but because those resources are so readily available, and generally in the industry we're constantly bombarded with the tools that we don't know, it might seem like you need to learn everything all the time. And I think just like we prioritize our work, it can be really helpful to prioritize our learning as well. So understanding what is information that you need to know, what is currently blocking your ability to work, that's information that you need to know. Stuff that you want to know is things that will impact your work in maybe like 1 to 2 months time, or that will greatly improve your ability to work. That's information that you want to know. And then the stuff that would be nice to know is anything beyond that that's maybe related to career growth or professional development. That is stuff that would be nice to know, and you should absolutely make that as like a year-end goal. bonus little point here. Some employers will offer tuition reimbursement or compensate or like cover your learning in some way, whether that's a course or whether that's actual post-secondary education. So if you can basically put something that you want to learn as a year-end goal, you can then get your employer to pay for that for you. And then because you accomplished your year-end goals, that will in turn get you a nice bonus at the end of the year because you actually accomplished your goal. So there are some like sneaky ways that you can kind of figure out how to get compensated for learning things for free. So definitely take advantage of those if your employer offers it. So in addition to that, learn how to ask good questions. And this is going to be more around like ad hoc kind of questions that come up or troubleshooting. But there's a fantastic Stack Overflow article on how to ask good questions. But basically, do your research, show the work that you've done, start with the problem, asking in the right channel. All of these things will help ensure that you're asking a better question, and they're going to get you a better response. And sometimes even just going through the act of properly asking a good question is going to help you find the answer that you need. So get in the habit of asking good questions. And in addition to that, learn how you learn. I think most people have probably like heard the difference, like, oh, I'm a visual learner. I just need to see a presentation or a talk. Some people need to read it. Some people need to really get their hands on a project and kind of get stuck in. Whatever that may be, I would say that sorry, I'm trying not to get distracted by chat. Whatever that may be, learn how you learn and understand that it's likely going to change for different things. For like high level audio concepts, I can generally read that and understand it. But for me, if I'm learning a tool like a game engine, I have to just get stuck in and try and make something. And I like learning it in a standardized way. So, so basically learning how you learn will really help. And this last point, basically, when you get an answer to something, capture it and share that answer. If you ask somebody, hey, where do I go to find these files? Screen capture it, share it. All of this stuff is going to be very helpful for yourself. And chances are you might need to ask that question again. So asking for help once, not a problem. Asking for help again and again and again can really be a problem. So however you choose to capture that information, definitely record it, save it in some way, and you kind of leave a breadcrumb trail for yourself where you can build up your own resource. Bonus points if you actually take those results and the answers that you get to questions and you share that with the rest of the team. Documentation is always a challenge in AAA, so share the answers that you find with the rest of your team, and that will be helpful. But essentially, be okay with not knowing things and be confident in saying, I don't know that. You don't need to know everything there is to know about audio programming. That's why the team has audio programmers. And consider what knowledge that you bring to the team and ensure that you're knowledgeable in your domain. Again, we are sound people, so we should be knowledgeable about sound. We don't need to get into the depths of some animation pipeline or something like that just to do this. And by the way, this one I will say, you'll see this as well with people that are looking for work too. It's kind of a natural thing that happens when creating demo reels and stuff like that, that sometimes people want their reels to look good. So they're like, oh, I'm trying to figure out how to scale a UV texture so that my grass looks good for my footstep demo. It's like, prioritize what you need to do, and chances are things will become easier and it'll break this problem down. So anyways, that's everything about knowledge gaps. We're making our way through here. Next one is communication. So this is, maybe you don't know how to ask for help regarding particular things, or it's a culture thing. You know, the typical audio wasn't invited. If I knew how to solve that last one, I would write my answer down, have it peer reviewed, and collect the Nobel Prize for how to solve all game audio problems. But I don't have an answer for that, but we can provide some potential helps here. So with this one, don't be afraid to ask for the correct terminology on things. Remember that when it comes to our particular field, we're dealing with audio terminology, we're dealing with game dev terminology, we're dealing with project terminology, company terminology. There's a whole lot of things going on here. And especially depending on where you may came from or what your background was, you just might know different names for different things. So never be afraid to ask for clarification on a particular term, term for something. Nobody is going to think less of you for that. And in general, I mean, this goes for more things outside of this, but sincerity and honesty definitely go a long way. If you are sincerely asking for answers to things, people will want to help you out if you're being honest. So generally, I find just being upfront when it comes to all things for asking the help that you need. And sometimes you don't need to know exactly what it is you're asking for. Sometimes you might be able to point to another example. Hey, we are doing this thing over here, and I need to set up another one of these things, or whatever it might be. But being sincere goes a long way. And along with that, sometimes you also just have to be annoying, and that can also be a bit of a challenge for people to overcome. Whether that's, tracking down the right person to help you out with getting something set up for audio, or having to constantly poke people for updates on things, whatever that may be. Just become okay with, like, people probably don't think you're being annoying. Most people are used to dealing with this stuff, so don't worry about pinging people on Slack. And then other times it's just a relationship or an office culture issue. The big thing with this is knowing when it's not your fight. So politics and stuff like this might be like, audio wasn't invited to a particular thing, or audio, if you feel like you're being excluded in some way. That just straight up might not be your fight. If you have a lead, if you have a director, a manager, go to them and make them aware of the challenges that you're dealing with, but know that you might, just because you saw the problem or you're encountering the problem, doesn't mean it's your issue to fix. So know when it's not your fight. And this one, fight politics with policy. This might just simply be, if audio is being excluded, can you make it policy that audio has to be included? Can you make actual sign off on this? And there was I put a little asterisk by this because Greg reposted something on AirWiggles that was like an amazing example of this just last night, which is the solution to getting paid inside of 60 days. Some companies will have like net 45 or net 60, whatever it is, where they have to wait. But if you basically include a 2% discount with which you also up your rates by 2% as a freelancer, then some companies have policy that says if there is a discount, they have to take advantage of the discount, and you offer a 2% discount if they pay you inside of 15 days, which I think is like an absolutely wonderful example of sometimes leveraging the fact that these companies have policy that they have to follow to the letter. Sometimes is like a weird little superpower that you can then leverage to find efficiencies and make sure that you're getting included. And in addition to that, show your work. I have heard of at least one example where somebody who was very high up in another domain, not audio, literally did not know that there was an audio department. They thought that sounds were just something the game engine did. So when they put a character in the game, they just thought the game engine made footsteps happen and stuff like that. And in part, that's probably because the audio team was not actually sharing the work that they were doing, and they're just kind of doing it. So it becomes harder for audio to be at the front of people's minds when audio is not actually sharing their work. So, so along with that, like videos and Slack channels and team updates and all that kind of stuff, it's fantastic to see non-audio people get really excited about audio things. And then because they're also creatives, they want to collaborate and they want to work on this stuff with you. So definitely don't discount just getting other domains excited about audio things. And that's going to make it much, much easier to solve some of these challenges for you. All right, last couple, and then we're done me rambling here. So creative challenges. This, again, I've broken this up into two places here. The first part of creative challenges are, I can't do this. I've never done that before. Maybe that's weapons. Maybe that's dialogue. Maybe that's creatures. Whatever it is, you're faced with something new that you've never done before. The simple answer to this is yes, you can. That is truly the only way that any audio problem has ever been solved, is somebody never had to do it before and then they did it. Like somebody came up with, I mean, we know who, but somebody had to come up with the sound of lightsabers when lightsabers didn't exist. We are constantly faced with new challenges. So just have that confidence that you can overcome this stuff. Personally, when I'm faced with a new challenge, I like to start with research. This isn't so that I can be too derivative or achieve parity with other sort of media that's already out there. It's mainly that I try and do my best to avoid common problems. I don't want to get caught in an easy pitfall that maybe other projects have fallen into. And luckily with GDC, YouTube, like there's no shortage of fantastic resources out there for doing research, but actually look into how has this sound been produced in the past, if that's relevant, and look at other medium, look at films, look at TV, whatever that may be. Just when you do that research, be ready to abandon it if it's not working and go with just what feels good, but I find it's a good starting point. So start with authenticity, but be ready to move away from that if it's not that exciting or it's not working. And then past that, break the problem down. What is the actual envelope of the sound that you need? Sometimes it's, it's much simpler. Do you need a looping sound? Do you need a one-shot sound, whatever that may be? Is there an arc to the sound? Do you need like a riser or some kind of an anticipation sound? Do you need a tail that sells the space that this sound is in? Whatever it may be. But once you start to break it down into the components that you need and the envelope, it becomes a much easier problem to solve. And then the other thing there too is, what is the general frequency response of the sound and how does that change over time? There's obviously like an ocean of nuance that we could get into here, but I find once you kind of do that, you also sort of liberate yourself from the need to go with authenticity. And once you kind of just look at like, oh, this is the envelope I need, and this is the general frequency response that I need, you kind of can use anything that you may have access to. And that's sort of how we end up with elephant roars as TIE fighter sounds and stuff like this. You go with what feels good and what sort of works for the action. It doesn't always need to be authentic. And then again, kind of back to our other point, fail fast. Just get something in game, in context right away, and don't be too sacred about your first one, and just get used to failing very quickly. And chances are you're going to be moving towards the correct answer right away. And then the last one for me here is, again, on creative challenges. My work is boring. I keep doing the same thing over and over again. So this might be when you find yourself reaching for the same plugin on every sound or pulling from the same library. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this, but it can become fatiguing and uninspiring. So what I recommend on this is try finger painting. Again, just get in the habit of opening something up and making sounds, and don't worry about saving it. Don't worry about, oh, I got to come up with a naming convention. Where does this fit into UCS so it can go my life? Just make sounds and get used to just actually making a mess over your work. It's going to get you over that blank canvas kind of syndrome much quicker. And it's just going to get you trying new things that you maybe haven't before. I really like just hopping into SoundMiner, hitting randomize a few times and grabbing a bunch of sounds and trying to make something with that. And you might uncover some nice hidden gems in your library. Or Team Audio's Effects Permutator is a great way for uncovering plugins that you maybe thought about in a context you didn't think about. So there's a lot of great things there. Rodrigo, the game audio oblique strategies is... Sorry, we're pulling gems. Aside from, if you need oblique strategies, it does exist, but the patch card games are really good for this. Shout out Nathan Moody for the artwork on these things. They're not directly applicable to all things outside of modular synthesis, but there's a lot of ways to go with that too. I think there are websites for oblique strategies, but my team, we do this on Fridays where I'll like pull a card and we like, or at least like I'll pull a card, and sometimes if we have capacity, we'll try to do that, follow that concept in whatever way we can. There's also other tools like that, like S-Layer or Polyplex, that are really good for randomization. And embrace contrast and change. Like all good art, it has contrast, it has dynamics. And we make video games, not films. So anything that you can do that leverages the player's input and really emphasizes change based on user input is going to have more impact. So don't always discount that. Again, we make interactive stuff, and anytime that we can leverage user input to create more contrast, that may be a more compelling thing than just the sounds themselves. So worth keeping in mind. And the limitations liberate. We all have way too many plugins. We all have way too many sounds. Sometimes self-imposed restrictions and limitations can help give you an envelope that you can actually push. But when you just open up a DAW and go, I have anything at my fingertips, it can be sometimes hard to know where to start. So whatever that may be, whether that's, I'm only going to work within this sound library, or I'm only going to use stock plugins, whatever that may be. If you need a little bit of a kick, sometimes you just have to force limitations on yourself. Other than that, speed round here. Sometimes you just need a change of scene or a change overall, whether that's working from home one day, working from the office one day. Change your DAW, change your medium. Try to avoid tropes and stereotypes as much as you can when it comes to audio. And And sometimes you just need to top up the creative tank, expose yourself to other creative works, try and imitate other creative works is one that I really like to do as well. And remember that garbage in, garbage out. If you're consuming bad media, you're probably going to be predisposed to creating bad media. So try and get some, expose yourself to what is good out there. And last thing is just get some sleep. So once again, I apologize for the format of this where we have to just like a machine gun a whole bunch of information right at you. So I'm just going to go through some quick highlights here and then throw it back to Presley. So what did we talk about? Imposter syndrome, again, trust facts, not your thoughts. Time management, prioritize your tasks and track your time. For organization, work backwards, start a to-do list. When it comes to poor quality sounds, just fail fast. For knowledge gaps, prioritize your learning and ask good questions. For communication, be sincere, share your work. And for creative challenges, do your research, break it down, and overall, you probably just need more sleep. Thank you. And Presley, I'll throw it back to you.
Hello. I love all of that so much. It's like a whole lecture in 46 minutes. We're doing great. So I'm going to talk about kind of how all of this stuff relates to the career and the paths to get into it and all that kind of stuff. I'll try to get through it a little bit fast so we can answer a bunch of questions. We'll see how it goes. So something to remember is that game audio is a super young profession and there aren't any actual like strict rules or guidelines for how to get a job. You don't need any specific degrees. There aren't any required competencies other than make cool sounds, be a cool person. And it's the reason it's so difficult for all of us to say which method is best because everyone's gotten into this in a different way. You can start with music performance and then head to production to get here. You can do what I did, which is get the music degree, realize you don't want to actually do music, and then go into theater sound design and then eventually end up here. You could start as a game content creator and move over. There are so many avenues to get in and they're all valid. And it all shows that, if you can prove that you're a kick-ass sound designer, you can rock the industry in general. But it makes it a lot more difficult for us to say, like, this is the way that you should do things. So always keep that in mind in the way that your career goes. And on top of that, once you get in, there's not really a single defined rubric for career progression either. And you'll see everybody has a different career path within that as well. Some people went to school and some didn't. Some have a music background and some don't. Some started in games. Others never touched a game before this point. Again, every avenue is valid, right? So there's so many things that you can do here to move yourself forward in your career path. I've seen people they're an intern and then they're a junior and then they're a senior, call it a day. But things can be wiggly at times in this career path. You can absolutely do the linear thing. That's happened before. Maybe you start as freelance and then head on to in-house work and realize that actually maybe in-house isn't my thing after all and go back to freelancing. You could develop your own games and then realize you like sound design best and eventually make it up there. It can be a little bit of chaos to find your place. And I think that's sort of an important thing to realize about your career is that keeping yourself open to what is available is one of the most beautiful things about this career and what is available to you. So for fun, I kind of made my own career path up here to show that things can kind of look a little bit all over the place. So for me, it's a little bit standard, but it started out a bit wonky. So I liked music, and the only thing my small town knew what to tell me how to do is to go and do a music degree. So I did. But then I realized performing sucks and I don't want to do it. So instead of that, I went into live sound. After that, I was like, this is still kind of performance because it's still live and there are still no room for errors and everything has to be done in a specific time frame. And I didn't like that. And that kind of led me to post-production, which got me to film school. And then once I got to film school, because I thought I was going into film because I didn't know that game audio was a career, I got there and somebody told me game audio was a career. And that pretty much started the more linear route for me. Once I found out that game audio existed, that's what I did from there. And as you can see, yeah, I did a lot of contracts for a while. I was temporary roles at a lot of places before landing my first permanent full-time gig, before eventually getting a senior promotion and then being hired at Gearbox as a senior. So yeah, it can all look different. It's all valid. Here's an example, I suppose, of what it could look like. So the challenges in your career are also a thing. You know, your career progression might be misaligned with the game direction. You might want to work on creatures, but there are no creatures in the game you get hired on to do. You could have temporary contracts and not know whether you're going to be employed in 3 months, and that's scary, and I get it. Imposter syndrome comes back on the career side as well, thinking that you're not worthy of this role. You are. I promise. I promise you are. The project requires more coding knowledge. You might have gotten into something because of your knowledge in Unreal blueprints, and then something just doesn't use blueprints anymore, and you could be like super confused by that, and that might be not exactly the direction you might want to go. There's also role stagnation, where you may have not gotten a promotion in 5 years, or you feel like you're not learning as much as you want to or progressing as fast as you want to. And then there's like the change in career direction in general. You might start as sound design and want to go into tech. You might start as tech and want to go into sound design. All of these things, again, are valid. And it all comes down to 2 major points. One is that your lead and your manager is there to help. That's the key. Especially when it comes to career goals. You can talk to your leads about it. You can talk about growth opportunities. This is all available to you if you come at it from a healthy angle. There's always going to be a learning opportunity, even if the project isn't 100% aligned with your personal goals. There's always going to be something that you can do on the project that you're on that can get you closer to those goals, or alternately, your leads can help you sort of like tailor the content that you're working on to better align with what you eventually want to be doing. All it takes is the question. And it's not going to look bad. It will never look bad to ask career-related questions. It means that you're curious. It means that you want to continue, and it means that you want to learn more. And ultimately, when you love what you do and you're passionate about what you do, you're going to effectively do better work faster. If you love it, the passion is there, and you want to learn more, so you do more. So no one's ever going to say that you shouldn't be doing something else at any point. But on that note, another part of it is always being prepared for a career shift. And this may sound like career shifts sometimes feel like it's all about layoffs or failings, but that's not the case at all. It can be fully initiated by you just because you want to learn more about a different subject. It could be a new role within a company. Like I was saying, you could go from sound design to tech, or it could be with a different studio if that's what it ends up being. Regardless of what it is, you have to be honest with yourself and your feelings towards where you're at and where you want to go, and carve that path out for yourself. The biggest thing is that curiosity is the key to moving forward. The more curious you are, the more things that you'll learn, the more questions that you ask, the more techniques that you'll learn. You're even going to network more. You're going to meet more devs from doing things this way. Even like Air Wiggles, all these talks and stuff like that, being curious enough to sit here and listen to people talking about the things they're passionate about is already proving that curiosity and getting you farther in what you're doing. The biggest thing about it, like audio can be a bit of a silo sometimes because we're so far at the end of production. And sometimes we get forgotten in meetings, as everyone knows, or deadlines don't leave enough room for audio. And a big part of this is advocating for your job and what you're doing, and taking the time to make sure that you're actually invited to the required meetings and meeting the other devs. So your cross-discipline teammates are your friends. They are your friends. This gives you your implementation info, your progress checks, things that you might have missed, and ultimately it gets your name out there. When you're showing your work to the other teams, they now know you exist, like Paul was saying earlier. So the more that you can do to talk to the other devs and talk to, the animators, the visual artists, the VFX artists, the more your name gets out there, and the more they'll remember, oh, hey, Paul was supposed to be in this, actually. He made this other cool thing. We should probably get him back in here for this. And also, honestly, the visual artists and the animators get real excited when you put audio onto their stuff. They get so excited when it all comes together with audio, and the faster that you can give them stuff like that, the more stoked they're going to be. And it usually it gives you this really nice collaboration space within that. So talk to the other disciplines, make yourself known, advocate for yourself, and be curious about what's going on around you. So moving on from that, one of the most critical skills that you can have in your career to get to this point is goal planning and retrospectives. This provides you a number of things. One, it's continuous progress tracking. You can always see where you've gotten to. You've seen, what you want to move towards or what you want to move away from. It shows you how you got to where you are, which can also help with the imposter syndrome. If you have this big list of things that you've accomplished in your career, it's so much easier to say, look at all this stuff I did. I successfully completed all that, and they liked my work because of all that. And that can help you through some of those mental blocks that come with this career as well. And on top of that, it gives you and your lead a roadmap for your personal improvement and growth. You can look back and say, hey, like, look at all these things I've done on creatures, but I haven't done much on ambiences, and I want to do ambiences now. And your lead can say, actually, yeah, like, you've absolutely rocked the creatures. Let's give you some of these things. All of that becomes available just by having all of this around. So also keep that in mind. One way to do this is with something called SMART goals. This is basically just a way of writing down your goals. So you'll see specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So say if your ultimate goal is I want to get better at creature design, you can take that and break it down into something that's a little bit more manageable. So, the specific would be I want to complete a creature for this game. Your measurable would be I will design and implement all audio for the creature. The achievable part of it is I will use approved library source or find the time to record the library source that I need in order to design and implement the audio for this creature. Your realistic goal, if this is your first time doing it, I'm going to ask for a bit of extra time and maybe some additional one-on-one meetings with people that have more experience in this area. And maybe even talk to the tech team to see what you might need to know on the implementation side for this new thing. You're going to build in that extra time for yourself to be realistic about meeting this goal. And then timely is pretty much just putting a deadline on it. I want this creature to be in-game before alpha. Whatever that may be for you is like a pretty critical part of writing a successful goal. And for that, it also comes down to task estimation. You will get better at this with practice, and it's going to take a while to get there. The more experience you have in an area, the better you're going to be at understanding how long you are going to take to make that thing. But always give yourself more time than you expect to need. This is critical. Like, even if you're experienced, even if you know exactly what's going to happen, add a couple of extra days. You might get pulled into a bunch of meetings. Something just might not be working on the creative side, or the tech might not be there yet. Build in that extra time for yourself. And if you're inexperienced in an area, build in even more time so you get the chance to learn without having to feel like you have to crunch through it to get something in game in time. Paul actually had a really good example of this that I decided to include here, so thank you for that, Paul.
I have to run right now, so I'm posting this in chat. I might be back in time. I will explain this right before I have to go.
Cool.
Basically, the other thing that I forgot to mention too, I forgot to link it in here, but it's in the resources sheet that I'll share afterwards, is this absolutely fantastic breakdown of estimating tasks. And I had never seen anybody actually do a breakdown about how to estimate tasks before this. But this is like not a too far-fetched thing when I have to like come up with an estimate for what I do. If it's a new feature, how many days is it going to take to record it? Double that for the number of days that it's going to take for editing. I said divide by 2 for implementing, but really I should have just left a bunch of question marks for implementation, because who knows? And then there's going to be X days for testing and iterating, and you add all of those up, and then I literally double it. And that is my like ballpark estimate. And if somebody goes, oh my God, that's too high, then you scale it down from there, but don't underestimate things as a starting point. Aim high. Don't be afraid to double your estimates and just see what happens. Hopefully I'll be back, but Presley, you're doing great.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, it's really important, obviously, for task estimation to make that happen. I also, and yeah, we can include the slides afterwards if that helps people. It's all good there. We'll make sure it's available for you. So another part of goals is personal goals. It doesn't just have to be, like I want to get this task done. This could be higher than that too. So personal goals and retrospectives, write out your career goals, like at least once a year. You can do, short, medium, and long-term goals, which could be in years. It could be in months, whatever it may be. I've included a little thing down there. I literally have done this every year for the past 3 years, where I make myself a get good document where I say to myself, these are the things that I want to be better at because I feel like I'm not good enough at them yet. This is literally mine for this year on the work side. I also have my personal goals on there because it shouldn't be just for work-related tasks. What are your goals? I have fitness goals on here as well. But all of this stuff can help you just kind of track who you are as a person and make you feel better about the things that you're accomplishing and not leave them in this like nebulous void of information in your brain. And again, like your lead is there to help. Leverage the people and the resources around you. Have these documents available and say, hey, these are the things I've been working on. How can I get better at these other things that I may not have as much experience in yet? All of these things are super valid, and you can kind of build them. Some teams will have like a rubric for this kind of stuff and some won't. I kind of made up, this is sort of what I do when it comes to my own goals. Which is basically a small paragraph at the top that says, this is what I did in this past year. This is what I'm looking forward to in this next year. And then for sound design, tech, and workflow, I'll do 3 separate categories. I'll highlight my year successes in those categories at the start. And then I'm going to list some goals. And generally speaking, goal 1 is going to be short term. Goal 2 will be mid. Goal 3 will be long term goals. And these could be anywhere from a couple of months to like 5 years in the future. Ultimately, it's up to you. You know yourself the best. You know what you're going to need. So this is sort of like a basic overview of maybe a way that you can think about your goals for the future. So all that being said, in a nutshell, advocate for yourself. Be honest about the things that you don't understand. Honesty is key with this kind of stuff. And the more honest you are, the better off you're going to be. Career planning takes time. This isn't something that ends the second you get your first job. Career planning goes on as long as you have a job. The best thing you can have is curiosity. Ask questions. See what else is out there. Be an advocate for your own brain and see what else you want to accomplish and do. And document all of that and see what else, you like keep a paper trail of all the things you've wanted to do or have done. And then take breaks, get some sleep, rest the brain. We're going to say that a lot, but it will always count. This is a really silly one. This is just a speed round of things that you might want to just think about that could help you in just general career development. So what are your debugging tools? What do you have access to? Understanding your task management software, whether it's like Jira or Trello or anything else. Update your Jiras. Update your Jiras. Go after this meeting and update your Jiras. Goals. Don't slack on your annual reviews. Make them happen. Keep up with them. See what you need to improve on and see what you've succeeded at in case you've succeeded at things early. Calibrate your speakers if you haven't. Back up your sessions and then back up the backup. And don't forget to stretch, which I always have to do because I'm old. So remember to stretch. One last thing we wanted to go over in this talk, and this is super quick, but in case anyone wanted to see what the job titles generally look like in a AAA setting, we just wanted to kind of quickly go over what they may be. Again, disclaimer, North America AAA perspective. So these might not be one-to-one, but might give you just sort of a general overview of what you might see. So for that, we have junior is do the job you're told. Do what they tell you to do and learn from your seniors and your mids and your leads. And then show them what you can do. Show that curiosity that you have and then be responsible for the sounds that you make. From there, you can move up to mid-level. Again, doing the job you're told, but now you're looking for opportunities to fix problems, but not necessarily have it be your job to fix them. So you could see something in game and ask questions about the tech or the sound design or whatever and bring it up to your lead and learn from that experience. You're going to be continuing to learn your new skills. You're going to find a mentor, see if there's any courses that are going to help you out. Show your work as much as you can, fail fast, get feedback early, and you might be responsible for a single area of the game, whether that's a creature or a typeset of some nature. That could all come into the mid-level. Then once you get to senior, yes, you're still doing your job, but now you're delegating what you can. But the biggest thing about senior is be the person that you wish you had starting out. Be the person that answers the questions or helps somebody along or gives that extra feedback or takes that extra time for other folks that are still learning. This is the time to be collaborative. This is the time to encourage and foster the growth of the team around you. And that also includes shielding juniors and mids from some of the bad stuff. This job can be a little bit crazy sometimes, and they might not know, especially a junior might not know when things are too much or when they have too much on their plate. So keep an eye out for that. That's your job now. You know what that means, and you have the experience to say that might be a little bit too much for you right now, in terms of just workload and stuff like that. It's now you can help through that in that sense. After that point, you can be a leader director, being a positive force for the audio team at large, and you can advocate for them. Generally speaking, leads and directors may have a little bit less to do on the sound design creation side because of where they are. So it's your turn to speak up and be the advocate for everybody else on your team and listen to your team to see where some problem areas might be. So you are now steering the ship. However, all of this being said, career growth doesn't have to be always this like vertical linear thing. It can be lateral. You might not want to be a manager or a director. You might want to continue being like in the trenches, as they say, with sound design or tech work. And that's okay too. You can see what options there are for you to be a senior, to sort of continue being a senior or a creative lead in the sound design world. You don't necessarily always have to go to this extra step of being in a more managerial position. It's all up to you and what you want your career to look like. So this is basically the end. We made it through. We have a bunch of additional resources that we will absolutely share with everybody for all of these things. There's a ton out there. This is going to be a general list, and it'll be available to you. We'll make sure it's available. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. But summary, we've learned about the dev cycle. We've learned about the common stages of game development and a general idea about audio's involvement at those stages. We've learned about the work, the common challenges that we face in it, and maybe some suggestions and methods that might help you through it. And we've learned about your career and understanding that career paths are all different and some common challenges in progression and how to overcome them. And then we've given you some resources to further your knowledge in a lot of these things. So, thanks. Thank you for listening. I know this was long. Thank you so much for being here for the whole thing. Happy to answer questions. Hopefully Paul makes it back, but if he doesn't, thank you so much for all of your time, and I hope this was helpful. I'll see if there are any questions that we may not have gotten to. I'm seeing seven replies in the questions thread, so let me go through them. Daniel asks, once the game is shipped and in preparation, is there usually a role to archive all materials, or that be something more relevant for a remaster or remake? Usually you want to try to back up all your stuff as much as possible as you go through. A lot of teams will push for you making sure that you back up all your stuff as consistently as possible. A good rule of thumb would also be doing it at the end of a milestone or at the end of a sprint. Just kind of bundle up all your work as much as you can and have that available. But there's I don't think I've ever seen a role for it, like a specific person doing it. It's sort of up to you to make sure that all your stuff is available. Mark says, as a temporary worker in the AAA industry, I've struggled balancing focus between my current role and looking for a permanent gig. Yeah, I feel that. Curious on your experiences regarding transitioning into a permanent role. Do you recommend focusing solely on the gig you do have? The best time to look for a job is when you have one is a very good statement, but yes, it can lead to burnout. I think a part of it is always keep an updated website or demo reel. The sort of like fortunate and unfortunate thing is that once you have your first job in the industry, it's a little bit easier to find others. The foot in the door is kind of like the most difficult part. And especially if you're temporary, try to, spend a couple of minutes every week to just make sure your website still works, to make sure your resume is updated, to make sure, if you have any other like little redesign projects that you've done. Something else to think about is keeping, saving time once a month to do like a new redesign. Do it in a day, do it in a weekend, whatever it may be. But definitely be careful of burnout. It can happen fast, especially when you're looking for jobs. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with it. Is I've just made sure, like every week, I just make sure that everything's updated while I had a temporary contract. I hope that helps. What's next? When doing research for tackling creative challenges, how do you decide that it's enough? You've already done enough research. That's such a difficult question to answer. It's always hard. Yeah. Time boxing, I'd say, would be my recommendation there. Time box yourself for the research, because I think we can all go down the rabbit hole way too fast. If you have something that's available to start it. And then if you need more research after that, go back to the research for a bit. But I think the biggest thing is just time boxing and making sure that you're not spending too much time for your own sake in that as well. How important is it that you have your own sound bank, given all the sound effects databases like Soundly? Is it a plus to have your own hard drive full of SFX? Yeah, absolutely. It's important to know what source that you can use and what you need. I think it's totally fine to have a bunch of library source that you've bought and stuff like that. But I think just a good exercise in general as a sound designer is recording as much as you possibly can. Just record all of it. and keep a database of your own of all the things. And it doesn't have to be relevant to a project. I'd actually recommend it not being relevant to the project for the most part. I've seen people do like 1 recording a day challenges where they just go out and do something. And I think that's like super critical to your own growth as a sound designer, is like, what other cool sounds can I find in my house? That kind of thing, right? So record every day and record often and keep it for yourself, and try to use like, you know, some decent organization, because that can get away from you really fast if you end up recording every day. Next one is, how important do you find work-life balance, and how much has it changed as you grow older in the industry? Much like many aspects of life, heading deeper into production cycle and career growth results in more responsibilities and many more tasks. How do you balance career growth and life? It's a good question. I like that question, and I don't know how to answer it in a succinct way. You have to be responsible for advocating for yourself, both in your career and in the time that you need away from work. Again, honesty is such a big role here. You need to be honest about what you need. Some people, just really like working a lot, and it is also like their work is their hobby. And some people will work more. But if you have a family, like a significant family thing for yourself that you want to be a part of, you have to advocate for that time. You have to figure out, like, I know some people say, I will not open any messaging software at work after 6 p.m., period. That's the role that they have for themselves, and they know it. And because of that, they will also either practice their speed in a lot of what they're working on, and they will also delegate where they need to. Sometimes, obviously, I mean, like, it's a creative role, and sometimes that doesn't happen. But the biggest thing is advocating for yourself and what you need. It's hard. And I don't have all the answers to this one, and I wish I did. And I struggle with it sometimes too. But the biggest thing is just be honest with yourself, and you need the balance. You need to have the balance. You have to have personal time and family time and hobby time away from the computer and away from the sound design life, even just for your ears. You have to give your ears a break. You're going to be so fatigued so fast if all you're doing is working. So build in the time to just, go out and sit and enjoy the day, or whatever you need to do. Have a nice lunch somewhere sometimes if you need to. Anything to get you away from this. You're going to be a better worker. You're going to be a better sound designer if you give your ears a break and you get the rest that you need, but only you know how much that's going to be for yourself. I hope I'm getting through these fast enough. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm like running through things really, really fast, but there's a lot of things, and I really appreciate it all. As a junior, how do you deal with feedback of a lead who tells you that you are supposed to make a really quick placeholder sound that needs to be in game in a short while, and then tells you why it's not final quality and doesn't listen to you about why you made a placeholder? Inconsistency in behavior. Paul was mentioning earlier in the talk where sometimes it is a communication issue, and it's unfortunate. And for situations like this where you're not getting the answers that you need, or you feel like things are going back and forth between like policy and stuff like that and what they're telling you, the hard thing to do is to speak up for yourself and book a meeting with them and tell them what's happening. But sometimes you just have to. Sometimes they might not realize that this is going on, especially if somebody's a lead for their first time, or if somebody's a little bit newer to the lead or managerial role, or even if they're not and it's just a really busy time in the project. Things can get away from you really fast, and there's a chance you might just kind of forget that you said something in the past. I've done that before, where I've forgotten that I've told somebody that we need a sound, and then I went back to it a week later and was like, right, that's a thing. Oh boy. It's really hard to book that meeting, but sometimes you have to. And if that meeting doesn't help, if you're on a larger team that has things like, somebody above them, HR, whatever it may be, it might come to that. I don't know what the answer is going to be there. But like I said, advocate for yourself, have the tough meetings if you really need them. And hopefully that helps you there. Laura says, any advice for a very wiggly line career wiggler, or after being plunged into the deep end? Where'd that go? It left. It got deleted. Never mind. I'm not going to answer that one then. Paul asks, what is an example of a normal scale of year goal? I'm not sure if I understand the question. If you're still here, Paul, can you elaborate? And yeah, actually, Jamie makes a good point there. Like, don't limit yourself to the junior roles if you ever go for in-house position. Like, just try. You might have the experience that they need as a mid-level or a senior. You never know. Just give it a shot and see what happens. The worst they can say is no. The worst they can say is they went with somebody else. Apply. If you think you can, apply. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's all good. Okay, I'm just going to go through one more time and see if I've missed any other questions. But I think we got through them all. Any other quick ones before we head off here? I think we're good. I think we did it. Again, thank you all so much for sticking around. You can see there, I'm on Discord as Frequencies. You can hit me up anytime. I'll always be available for questions and stuff like that, so don't feel like you have to limit any of these questions to here. If anything pops up after the talk, we'll make sure, I'll make sure to get a hold of you on Discord. It's all good. Yeah, thank you so much for everybody for sticking this one out. We really appreciate it.